Remember when Sunday nights meant gathering around the TV to watch Rod Serling step out of the shadows and introduce another journey into the unknown? The Twilight Zone gave us twist endings that rewired how we thought about television, black and white atmospheres that felt more real than color, and a narrator whose voice became synonymous with the unexpected. For 5 seasons and 156 episodes, it was appointment viewing, a show that made science fiction respectable and proved television could be art. But the show you remember almost didn't survive its first season. Rod Serling battled network executives who wanted cheaper content, sponsors who censored tea, and his own creative exhaustion while writing nearly 60% of every episode himself. The narrator wasn't supposed to be Serling. The most famous episodes were salvaged disasters. Budget constraints forced innovations that became iconic. Today, we're counting down 20 weird facts you never knew about the Twilight Zone. Stick around for number 1, because it reveals the moment Rod Serling chose dignity over profit. If you're new here, this is where we dig into the stories behind the movies you love, the ones the studios don't put on the poster. If you're into behind-the-scenes chaos, happy accidents, and Hollywood weirdness, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It helps more than you think. Number 20. The pilot episode, Where Is Everybody, opens with Earl Holliman wandering through a deserted town called Oakwood. Empty streets, abandoned shops, a diner with food still on the counter. It's one of television's most unsettling openings. But that town wasn't just a set. It was the Universal Studios backlot, and it would go on to become one of the most recognizable locations in cinema history. Every subsequent Twilight Zone episode moved production to MGM Studios in Culver City after the pilot. Serling's Cayuga Productions rented space starting June 1959, gaining access to MGM's extensive standing sets, props, and costume departments. That switch gave the show its visual identity, the look audiences remember. But that first episode planted a seed in a location that would become iconic for entirely different reasons. 26 years later, director Robert Zemeckis would use that exact same Universal backlot street set as Hill Valley in Back to the Future. The clock tower, the storefronts, the layout, all of it was the same location where Earl Holliman experienced his lonely nightmare. It's one of Hollywood's great unintentional connections. The place where the Twilight Zone began its exploration of isolation and paranoia became the setting for one of cinema's most beloved stories about time, connection, and home. Next time you watch Back to the Future, you're seeing where the Twilight Zone took its first steps. That's not trivia. That's television and film history sharing the same street corner. Number 19. Third from the Sun. Needed to hide a crucial twist, that the characters fleeing atomic war aren't on Earth at all. Director Richard L. Baer had a problem. How do you make everything feel subtly wrong without tipping your hand? His solution was to weaponize the camera itself. Every scene in the episode was shot at deliberately crooked, tilted Dutch angles. Not enough to be obvious, but enough to subconsciously unsettle viewers. But Baer went further. He used an extreme 28mm wide-angle lens even for close-ups, where standard practice called for 75mm or 100mm lenses. The distortion was radical. Baer explained his approach. I shot up under tables and passed flashlights to people's faces. Everything looked slightly warped, slightly off, in ways the audience couldn't quite identify. Producer Buck Houghton called it very clever. The visual wrongness primed viewers without revealing why. The technique worked so well that audiences reported feeling disoriented throughout the episode, but couldn't explain what was causing it. The answer was simple. Everything felt wrong because it was photographed wrong. The camera became a storytelling tool, creating unease through pure optical distortion. It's a masterclass in visual misdirection. The twist was hidden in plain sight, embedded in every frame through lens choice and camera angle. When the final reveal came, that they were fleeing to Earth, not from it, the preceding visual disorientation made perfect sense. The whole episode had been shot from an alien perspective. Audiences just didn't realize it until the last line. Number 18. In 1961, FCC Chairman Newton Mino stood before the National Association of Broadcasters and delivered one of the most famous condemnations in television history. He called American television a vast wasteland, a cultural embarrassment filled with game shows, westerns, and mindless entertainment. It was a scorched earth critique that made network executives sweat. But amid the devastation, Minu named one exception. He singled out the Twilight Zone as the only weekly series he found dramatic and moving. For a show perpetually on the ratings bubble, this was life-saving validation. CBS had been banking on a 21 to 22 Nielsen rating, The show never reached that level, typically hovering around 18 to 20. Those numbers would normally trigger cancellation. Rod Serling protested the network's math publicly. 15 million viewers, more than saw Oklahoma during the entire run of the show on Broadway, and they want to cancel. His point was valid, but irrelevant. Television ran on ratings, not logic. What mattered was critical acclaim. The show won 3 consecutive Hugo Awards for Best Dramatic Presentation, an unprecedented streak that wouldn't be matched until Doctor Who in 2008. That combination of FCC endorsement and industry recognition became a shield. Critical acclaim couldn't save a show forever, but it bought time. And for the Twilight Zone, time meant more episodes, more innovation, and more chances to prove that television could be something more than a wasteland. When the chairman of the FCC says your show is the exception, people pay attention. Number 17, budget constraints force creativity, and the Twilight Zone proved it by turning MGM's prop warehouse into a science fiction universe. The studio's 1956 film Forbidden Planet became the show's unofficial parts supplier, and audiences never noticed. The spaceship Agnes Moorehead battles in The Invaders was a recycled Forbidden Planet miniature. The alien costumes, spaceship ramp, and flying saucer in The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street were pulled from the same film. Stock footage from The Day the Earth Stood Still and Earth vs. the Flying Saucers supplemented original effects. To Serve Man holds the record for highest stock footage use of any Twilight Zone episode. Its entire Washington, D.C. saucer arrival was lifted directly from The Day the Earth Stood Still. This wasn't laziness. It was survival. Television budgets couldn't match feature films, so producers rated what already existed. But something unexpected happened. The recycling became part of the show's visual language. Audiences recognized the props from other films subconsciously, creating a shared science fiction universe before cinematic universes were a concept. Forbidden Planet's aesthetic bled into the Twilight Zone, which influenced Star Trek, which shaped everything that followed. Think about that. Budget constraints didn't just force recycling. They accidentally built a visual vocabulary that connected science fiction across media. The same flying saucer appearing in multiple contexts became a cultural shorthand. Constraints bred creativity, and creativity built a language that's still being spoken today. Not bad for salvaged props. Number 16. The Midnight Sun depicts a world where Earth's orbit has shifted, bringing it closer to the sun. Temperatures soar, people suffer, and director Anton Leader decided that if the characters were going to suffer, the cast and crew would suffer too. Filming took place during a Los Angeles summer already brutal. The sets had no air conditioning, standard for the era. But Leader went further. He instructed the electrical grip to add actual heat lamps to the already sweltering environment. Not for visual effect. The lamps weren't meant to show on film. They were there purely to create genuine physical distress. Leader explained his reasoning. I asked the electrical grip to add heat. Not so much that it would show on the film, but heat that we would feel on the set. Cast and crew approached heat stroke conditions. The suffering was real, and it shows in every frame. But Leader was strategic. I didn't do that throughout because its effect would have been lost eventually. We would have just been plain simply miserable and angry with each other. He used the technique for select scenes, maximizing impact while minimizing resentment. The melting painting effect was achieved by painting on a heated surface and applying additional warmth to make the pigment physically drip. Total episode budget, $52,577 over 3 days. The Midnight Sun remains one of the show's most viscerally uncomfortable episodes, and the discomfort wasn't acting. It was documentation of actual suffering. Number 15, the voice that defined the Twilight Zone, the measured, slightly ominous tone that introduced each journey into the unknown, almost belonged to someone else entirely. Rod Serling wasn't the first choice. He wasn't even the second choice. Westbrook Van Voorhis, famous from the March of Time radio series, narrated the pilot, Where Is Everybody? CBS executives quickly decided his voice was a little too pompous sounding. They wanted something different. Talent agent Ira Steiner floated Orson Welles as a possibility. Welles was interested, but he wanted more money than sponsors were willing to pay. That door closed. CBS executive William Self recalled the next development. Finally, Rod himself made the suggestion that maybe he should do it. It was received with skepticism. None of us knew Rod except as a writer, but he did a terrific job. That skepticism is remarkable in hindsight. Serling's voice became synonymous with the show, but at the time, he was an unproven narrator. Serling remained voice-only for the first 35 episodes. He didn't appear on camera until the season 1 finale, A World of His Own. Fan response to his promotional spots was so strong that the producers decided to feature him on camera starting in season 2. Those iconic introductions, Serling standing in shadow, cigarette in hand, were born from audience demand, not creative vision. The voice that became television's most recognizable narrator was a budget compromise, and it worked perfectly. Sometimes the best creative decisions happen because all the expensive options fall through. Number 14. Living Doll features Talkie Tina, the threatening doll that torments Telly Savalas with increasingly sinister messages. It's one of the show's most unsettling episodes, and the doll's voice is crucial to making it work. That voice belonged, uncredited, to legendary voice actress June Foray, already famous as Rocky the Flying Squirrel and Natasha Fatale. But here's the brilliant meta layer that most viewers never knew. Talkie Tina was based on Mattel's real-world Chatty Cathy doll, which became one of the biggest toy phenomena of the early 60s. And June Foray was the original voice of Chatty Cathy. She was literally voicing a sinister version of her own commercial creation. The physical prop used in the episode was actually a Vogue Briquette doll, not a Chatty Cathy, but the inspiration was unmistakable. Child actress Tracy Stratford, who played Savalas' daughter, recalled being genuinely frightened by him on set. He was intense to act opposite and pretty intimidating. I believe he really lived his role while he was working. That intensity wasn't accidental. Savalas committed fully to the role of a man being psychologically destroyed by a toy. The episode's credited writer was Charles Beaumont, but the actual script was ghost-written by Jerry Soule, a fact concealed due to Beaumont's deteriorating health. Layers of deception in an episode about a doll that deceives. The irony is almost too perfect. Foray's voice work created two cultural icons, one beloved, one terrifying, both using the exact same vocal performance style. Number 13. Charles Beaumont was responsible for 22 credited episodes of The Twilight Zone, making him half of the show's creative core alongside Serling and Richard Matheson. But around age 34 in 1963, Beaumont began showing signs of a mysterious brain disease, possibly Pick's disease or early-onset Alzheimer's. His ability to write, speak, and remember deteriorated rapidly. Within months, the man who'd crafted some of television's most sophisticated scripts could barely complete a sentence. Rather than let Beaumont lose his income, fellow writers made a decision that violated Writers Guild rules. They ghost-wrote scripts under his name. Jerry Soule wrote at least 3 episodes credited to Beaumont: Living Doll, The New Exhibit, and Queen of the Nile. O.C. Rich ghost-wrote Dead Man's Shoes. John Tomerlin also contributed. Fees were split evenly. The arrangement was kept completely secret. Soule reflected on the arrangement. "I didn't have to do anything but write. What more could you ask? It was an act of professional compassion disguised as business as usual." The Writers Guild would have sanctioned everyone involved if the truth had come out. Beaumont died on February 21, 1967 at age 38. His son Christopher later described his father's final years. He looked 95 and was, in fact, 95 by every calendar except the one on your watch. Together, Serling, Beaumont, and Matheson wrote 127 of the show's 156 episodes, 81% of the entire series. Some of those episodes weren't written by who audiences thought. Number 12. CBS executive James Aubrey despised anthology series. He wanted cheap, repeatable formats that could sell advertising reliably. The Twilight Zone was everything he hated. Expensive, unpredictable, critically acclaimed, but ratings challenged. When Aubrey became Serling's primary antagonist, he pushed for cost-cutting measures. One nearly destroyed the show. During season 2, Aubrey forced an experiment. 6 episodes shot on videotape instead of film at CBS Television City. The episodes were The Lateness of the Hour, The Night of the Meek, The Whole Truth, 22, Static, and Long Distance Call. The videotape format required a 4-camera live TV-style setup that destroyed the show's signature cinematic look. The results were flat, stagey, lacking the depth and shadow that made the Twilight Zone visually distinctive. Total savings, approximately $6,000 per episode, roughly $30,000 across all 6. The experiment was immediately abandoned and never repeated. The network learned what the creative team already knew. The Twilight Zone's visual identity was essential to its impact. The irony cuts deeper when you understand who built that visual identity. Cinematographer George T. Clemens shot 117 of 156 episodes, won an Emmy in 1961, and had operated cameras on Citizen Kane and High Noon. Clemens personally convinced Serling to stay with black and white photography when color was being considered, arguing it was more in keeping with the Twilight Zone vibe, between the light and the darkness. Saving $30,000 nearly destroyed what made the show work. Sometimes the cheapest option is the most expensive mistake. Number 11. Between seasons 3 and 4, The Twilight Zone nearly died. Not from cancellation, but from something worse, abandonment. In early 60s television, shows required sponsors. When Serling and his team failed to secure a sponsor for the 1962-63 season, CBS didn't cancel the show outright. They simply put it on hold indefinitely and replaced it with fair exchange. No formal cancellation, no closure. Just limbo. When that replacement crashed spectacularly in the ratings, CBS resurrected The Twilight Zone in January 1963. But there were conditions. 2 brutal conditions. First, a later time slot, 9:30 p.m. Thursdays, that changed the audience demographic. Second, episodes doubled to hour-long runtimes. Publicly, Serling pretended optimism. Privately, he knew it was a disaster. He told reporters, "If we jumped in January, I'd feel like a relief pitcher, and I'd rather start for the team." The metaphor was apt. The hour-long format strangled what made the show work. Serling admitted afterward, "A good show for us is a dramatic vignette with a punch ending. And that's almost impossible at the hour length." Of the 18-hour-long episodes produced, Serling considered only one successful. On Thursday, We Leave for Home. And even that one, he felt he'd overwrote. Season 4's Nielsen ratings collapsed from Season 3's approximate 3,144 points to 2,149. Worse, longtime producer Buck Houghton had been forced to take another job during the hiatus. He never returned. CBS restored the half-hour format for Season 5, but the creative spark of the first 3 seasons was permanently dimmed. All right, we're at the halfway mark, and things are about to get even wilder. Before we hit the top 10, I want to hear from you. What's your favorite Twilight Zone episode or twist ending? Drop it in the comments. And if you're enjoying this, smash that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Number 10. The Encounter starred George Takei and Neville Brand in a 2-character study of racial tension. A World War II veteran and a Japanese-American man meet in an attic, where old grievances and new suspicions collide. The episode was controversial from the start, but one element drew immediate protests: the implication that the Japanese-American character's father had signaled enemy planes before Pearl Harbor. Japanese-American civil liberties groups objected forcefully. CBS pulled the episode from syndication entirely. It did not air again until Sci-Fi's 2016 New Year's Marathon, over 50 years later. George Takei, who had himself been interned as a child during World War II, told the Television Academy, "It has a unique distinction of being the only Twilight Zone that was aired only once. The irony is that Takei's own life story embodied the injustice the episode was trying to explore, however clumsily. His family was sent to internment camps based on the same racist assumptions the episode depicted. But the execution was flawed enough that the episode became what it was criticizing, a perpetuation of harmful stereotypes disguised as social commentary." Separately, Death's Head Revisited, Serling's unflinching episode about concentration camp horrors, was never aired in Germany. Some truths were too uncomfortable, even for a show built on uncomfortable truths. The Twilight Zone pushed boundaries constantly, but sometimes it pushed too far, or not far enough, or in the wrong direction. Even groundbreaking television makes mistakes. Number 9. The Twilight Zone exists because censors destroyed Rod Serling's earlier work. The catalyzing event was his teleplay Noon on Doomsday for U.S. Steel Hour, an allegory about the murder of Emmett Till, the 14-year-old black boy brutally lynched in Mississippi in 1955. Serling wanted to tell that story, to make America confront what it had done. The networks had other ideas. They rewrote it repeatedly. The victim became an unnamed foreigner. The setting moved from Mississippi to New England, then to Alaska. Each revision stripped away more meaning until the story was unrecognizable. What had been a searing indictment of American racism became a vague story about prejudice in the abstract, set nowhere, meaning nothing. Ford Motor Company had the Chrysler Building digitally removed from a New York skyline in a program they sponsored. On Playhouse 90, the line "Got a match?" was cut because the sponsor sold lighters. Every script Serling wrote was subject to sponsor veto. Serling told Mike Wallace in a September 1959 interview, days before The Twilight Zone premiered, that science fiction would not be controversial with sponsors, network executives, or the general public, and would escape censorship. The only documented direct sponsor alteration on The Twilight Zone itself came in Judgment Night, where a British captain's scripted order for tea was changed to a tray because sponsor General Foods, parent of Sanka Coffee, objected. Science fiction became Serling's shield, allegory became his weapon, and The Twilight Zone became the show where he could finally say what he meant. Number 8. The Invaders is one of The Twilight Zone's most celebrated episodes, a nearly silent showcase for Agnes Moorehead as a woman defending her rural home from tiny alien attackers. But the episode exists only because of a creative pivot. Writer Richard Matheson originally pitched a concept called Devil Doll. It was rejected outright. Matheson reworked the concept with a science fiction angle, and it became the Agnes Moorehead solo performance. Moorehead initially refused the role when she learned there was no dialogue. Director Douglas Hyes convinced her by invoking her famous radio performance in Sorry, Wrong Number. This will be the opposite side of the coin. Moorehead, who had studied mime under Marcel Marceau himself, chose to play the role like an animal under attack. The miniature invader creatures were designed by makeup artist William Tuttle, inspired by the Michelin Tire Man. Hyes provided the uncredited voice of the astronaut in the episode's twist ending, revealing that the invaders were human astronauts and the woman was an alien on another planet. Years later, Matheson revived his original rejected Devil Doll concept. He turned it into a short story called Prey, which became the legendary Zuni fetish doll segment of Trilogy of Terror in 1975. Karen Black's performance, fighting a cursed doll that comes to life, became one of the most terrifying sequences in television history. Two classics, both born from the same rejected pitch. One rejection spawned two nightmares. Number 7. Nightmare at 20,000 Feet features one of television's most iconic monsters, the gremlin on the airplane wing that only William Shatner's character can see. But the creature audiences remember was never supposed to exist, at least not in the form it took. The episode was originally assigned to director Jacques Tourneur, the legendary filmmaker behind Cat People. Tourneur's vision was atmospheric and subtle. He envisioned the gremlin as a man in a black suit covered in reflective dust, barely visible, more shadow than creature, a nightmare glimpsed at the edge of perception. When young director Richard Donner replaced Tourneur for undocumented reasons, the approach shifted entirely. Makeup artist William Tuttle lacked the time and budget for a complete creature suit. The body was an off-the-rack selection from MGM's costume department. Tuttle created only the head and face. The result infuriated writer Richard Matheson. I didn't think much of that thing on the wing. It looked rather like a surly teddy bear. The performer inside the costume was Nick Cravat, a professional acrobat who had toured in the 1930s with his childhood friend Burt Lancaster. Cravat's acrobatic skill was essential. Special soles were built into the costume's feet so he could maintain balance on the slippery wing surface while being blasted with wind, rain, and snow effects. A revealing production goof survives. Rain trickling straight down the airplane window, betraying the fact that the plane never moved. The episode became iconic despite the teddy bear gremlin its own writer hated. Number 6. Eye of the Beholder is a masterclass in sustained misdirection. For over 20 minutes, director Douglas Hyes had to conceal every face on screen without the audience consciously noticing. One slip, one accidental reveal, and the episode's entire structure collapses. Hyes' solution was choreography. The camera moved constantly, timed so that when somebody turns around and starts to turn towards you, someone else walks in front of the camera just at that moment. Producer Buck Houghton called it the most difficult director's job that ever came down the pike. Hayes cast the doctors and nurses with his back turned, selecting only by voice. What I wanted were the most sympathetic voices I could hear, he explained. The central character, Janet Tyler, was played by two actresses. Maxine Stewart performed under bandages. Donna Douglas, pre-Beverly Hillbillies, played the revealed face. Douglas matched Stewart's vocal intonation so precisely that no dubbing was necessary. Cinematographer George T. Clemens placed the camera inside a fish tank with bandages wrapped around the outside, simulating the patient's restricted viewpoint. The pig face prosthetics were adapted from leftover Morlock makeup pieces from MGM's The Time Machine. William Tuttle created 3 distinct pig face designs applied to roughly a dozen actors. Hyes' wife, Joanna, played the reception nurse. He recalled the awkward moment when she arrived in full makeup. "Hi, honey. Shouldn't you be in makeup?" The day did not go well from that point afterward. Number 5. The Howling Man contains what may be the most ingenious practical effect in the entire series. Director Douglas Hyes needed to show a man transforming into the devil while walking continuously down a corridor. No freeze frames, no dissolves, no obvious cuts. The transformation had to appear seamless and continuous, happening mid-stride. Hayes' solution was elegant in its complexity. Actor Robin Hughes walked down a corridor past 5 stone pillars while the camera tracked alongside on a dolly. Hughes performed the complete walk multiple times, each time wearing a different stage of progressive devil makeup. Every version was filmed as a separate full take. In the editing room, Hayes spliced together segments from each take at the exact frames, where the stone pillars momentarily blocked the camera's view of Hughes. The pillars served as natural wipes, hiding the cuts. The result was an apparently continuous shot of a man transforming mid-stride. Hayes also employed a color filter technique borrowed from the 1931 film Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Red makeup applied to the actor's face was invisible under red filtered light, but became visible when the lighting switched to green filtered light. Writer Charles Beaumont had wanted only a glimpse of a cloven hoof at the end. Hayes overruled him, insisting on the full transformation. "I don't want to see them suddenly become immobile and the makeup changes," Hayes said. "I want to see him moving all the time. The makeup is changing." It looked like magic. It was craftsmanship. Number 4. To Serve Man has one of the most famous twist endings in television history. It's the episode everyone remembers, the Knaumets arriving as benevolent aliens. The book titled To Serve Man revealed as a cookbook. It's perfect, except Rod Serling thought it was a disaster. After the initial shoot wrapped, Serling wrote to original author Damon Knight on October 12, 1961. The letter was blunt. To Serve Man turned out piss poor. A combination of horrible direction and a faithless script bit your back. Serling was furious with himself and everyone involved. Director James Sheldon was brought in to film additional scenes. The Knaumets' dialogue was rewritten and re-recorded. Stock footage was incorporated to add production value. The episode was essentially rebuilt in editing. 7-foot-tall Richard Kiel played every single Knaumet in the episode, filmed from different angles to simulate multiple aliens. Like David Prowse as Darth Vader, Kiel was seen but not heard. His voice was replaced by Joseph Ruskin, who delivered the aliens' measured neutral tone. Kiel recalled the situation years later. They had it in the contract that they could use someone else's voice. "I was given a chance at it. I remember being very tired after hours and hours of makeup and filming, and I guess I didn't do that great a job." Total production cost, even after extensive reshoots, $61,119.59. One of the show's most iconic episodes was salvaged from what its creator considered a complete disaster. Number 3. Walking Distance originated during a moment of unexpected emotion. Rod Serling was strolling the MGM backlot when he was overwhelmed by how closely the standing sets resembled his childhood hometown of Binghamton, New York. The resemblance triggered grief he'd been carrying for over a decade. Serling's father had died while Rod was serving in World War II in the Philippines. He never made it home in time. Walking Distance became his attempt to process that loss through fiction. A man travels back to his childhood and encounters his younger self, trying to recapture something irretrievably lost. His daughter Jodie confirmed in a 2019 interview that this was her father's favorite episode because it contained pieces of him in it. The town sets were originally built for MGM's Meet Me in St. Louis in 1944. A carousel was rented specifically for the production, becoming the episode's central image. Childhood joy spinning endlessly, forever out of reach. The episode nearly didn't exist. CBS Vice President William Dozier read the script and rejected it. "Bullshit. This doesn't work. Who the fuck's gonna believe this, Rod?" Serling and producer Buck Houghton fought to get it made, and they won. Composer Bernard Herrmann wrote an original score exclusively for the episode, widely considered among the finest music in the series. Years later, Binghamton installed a plaque near its real carousel, reading Rod Serling, creator of The Twilight Zone. The episode one executive tried to kill became Serling's most personal statement. Number 2. The arithmetic of The Twilight Zone reveals an almost superhuman workload. Rod Serling personally wrote 92 of the show's 156 episodes, nearly 60% of the entire series. This wasn't spread evenly. Season 1 alone required 28 scripts, as Serling scrambled to establish the show's voice and fill a 36-episode order. He wrote these while simultaneously teaching classes at Antioch College, battling sponsors over content, rewriting other writers' submissions, and serving as the show's public face through constant promotional appearances. The creative toll was immense. By season 4, exhaustion was evident. Serling openly admitted burnout in interviews. "The bulk of our stories lacked the excitement, and punch of the shorter dramas we intended when we started 5 years ago. The admission was remarkably honest. Most showrunners would never confess to decline while the show was still running. When Season 5 ended and CBS declined renewal, Serling's response was telling. In a strange way, I don't really blame the network. We've been on 5 years, and I think the show took on kind of an aged look. He'd been teaching, writing, producing, and hosting simultaneously for half a decade while fighting James Aubrey's cost-cutting measures and sponsor interference. The show's cancellation may have been, for Serling himself, something closer to relief than defeat. He never created another anthology series. The workload had broken him. The man who defined anthology television walked away from the format because maintaining it at that level of quality had become unsustainable. Number 1. The most revealing production story in the Twilight Zone's history involves an episode most people have never seen. Actor Paul Douglas was cast as the lead in The Mighty Casey, an episode about a robot baseball pitcher. Serling had been reluctant to hire Douglas, who had a reputation as an alcoholic, but Douglas's agent assured Serling he would be sober. On the first day of filming, Serling noticed something wrong. Douglas appeared, in Serling's words, even in black and white, mottled, high color, semi-diffuse, a breath so short that he couldn't continue one short staccato sentence without gasping for breath. Douglas completed filming. He died of a heart attack the next day, September 11, 1959. CBS refused to finance a reshoot. Staff members pointed out the tremendous exploitation and publicity possibilities of airing a dead man's final performance. Serling refused. He personally paid $27,000 from Cayuga Productions funds, roughly half an entire episode's budget, to recast the role with Jack Warden, hire replacement director Robert Parrish, and completely reshoot the episode. Serling explained his reasoning. The tremendous exploitation and publicity possibilities of having Douglas' final performance on The Twilight Zone were pointed out to us by members of our staff. But in the final analysis, it was decided to do the right thing that was right for Paul and remake the film. That $27,000 was money his production company desperately needed. Serling paid it anyway. It is perhaps the clearest window into who Rod Serling was. A man who would bankrupt himself before compromising someone else's dignity. The Twilight Zone was shaped as much by what went wrong as what went right. Budget constraints forced recycling of Forbidden Planet props and time machine makeup, yielding iconic visuals. A rejected pitch became Trilogy of Terror. A teddy bear gremlin that horrified its own writer became the show's most famous monster. Throughout it all, Rod Serling wrote 92 of 156 episodes while fighting sponsors and battling network executives. Serling didn't just create a television show. He invented the modern showrunner model. Every prestige drama, from The Sopranos to Breaking Bad, operates within the framework he pioneered. If this video surprised you, drop your favorite fact in the comments. Like, subscribe, and share this with someone who loves this show. And as always, there is a fifth dimension beyond that which is known to man. We'll see you next time.